Welcome to the Old Fashioned Masonic Podcast, where we talk all things masonry while drinking an old fashioned. I'm Brian.
And I'm Russ.
I'm Dave.
Dave's our quiet one. You've seen Dave is our resident historian. We had just talked about doubling his salary because some of the content that he continues to bring to the table. So put in the comments what you think he should make and divide it by 5. That is the number. So today, being 4th of July weekend, we are going to talk about the Masons that signed the Declaration of Independence. So we thought this was very timely, and this releases exactly when it should. Some things I learned on research. Tell me if you've learned. So most people may think that the Declaration of Independence was signed on July 4th, 1776. No, it was not. It was approved by the Continental Congress that day, but it was actually signed on August 2nd. Through the research, it was actually read aloud for the first time by John Nixon in Philadelphia. John Nixon was not a Mason that we're aware of.
Correct.
But he was known as just this unbelievable orator. Right? Fair?
Yeah. Amazing order is the word.
So on July 8th, where did he read it?
In Philadelphia.
In Philadelphia, yeah. In front of a large crowd. And so Thomas Jefferson reportedly was very disappointed by the reading of it, despite how great an orator he is. Because Thomas Jefferson wrote the Declaration, purportedly wrote the Declaration.
He was one of 5 on the team.
Right.
Yeah.
He believed it to be a 28-point sanction of King George. But when it was read as a rah-rah moment for the masses. And so Thomas Jefferson was a little bit disappointed, but I would argue that it may not have had the impact it had if it wasn't for John Nixon reading it.
Okay. That's a great point.
Very
All right.
cool.
Didn't know that. So Freemasons, there's a lot of signers of the Declaration of Independence that were Masons. Most people think that they were all, and they were not. Of the 56 signers?
56.
56 signers of the Declaration of Independence, we're going to talk about the ones that we can confirm, and that number kind of changes over the years with more research, that were actually members of a Masonic lodge. So we're going to start off with the very first signer, which everyone knows who it is. It is John Hancock. John Hancock, if you've ever seen a copy of the Declaration of Independence, it's a very large signature.
Yeah, so what's up with that?
We've heard rumors.
Yeah.
Right.
What's
And
one rumor you've heard?
You've heard the story, right? On why he signed so large? I'm assuming.
The one is about, he wanted to make sure that the king could see it without his spectacles or whatever.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
That is the story that has gone on for the centuries.
Do you buy that?
No, I don't.
I think he was the first signer, and he signed it big, and they were going to run out of damn space, and they're like, Hancock, what did you do, bro?
That's exactly right.
Right? You buy that?
So he was the president of the Continental Congress.
Yeah.
So he had the luxury of going in and signing first.
Right.
And
The Second Continental Congress.
Oh, fair.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Right. The current at the time.
Right.
So he had the luxury or the duty to go in and sign first. So he signed the way he would normally sign.
his name.
And then the other 55 delegates walked up and said, well, we're not all going to fit if we sign it the way you sign it, Hancock. So they changed it from there. But the story is so good about the spectacles that it just stopped.
If he didn't sign it first, it may not have been as large, and you wouldn't know him as Hancock. I think, put your John Hancock here. I think as much as it is you were the first signer, it was because it was, and frankly, it's a beautiful signature.
Yeah. There might not be a Hancock building in Chicago today if it wasn't.
There we go. And there may not have been great music on Beverly Hills Cop by an offspring of John Hancock, which was Herbie Hancock, who everyone should know that. Look that up. Look down the lineage. And let you put all that together. That's a mess. So John Hancock was 40 when he signed. He was a very wealthy business merchant, and you're going to find out a lot of these men were very wealthy. The 26th signer was Benjamin Franklin, who happened to be 70 at the time of the signing. He was a Grand Master of Pennsylvania. He was actually the editor of the Declaration. He was one of them that they talked to about initially drafting it, but he did not, as an editor, he did not want to be edited. That's kind of the rumor, the story about that. He was an active 50-year Mason. Also, the first printed Masonic book ever was done by Brother Ben Franklin.
Wow.
So the next one we're going to talk about, who signed at the age of 32, Elbridge Gerry. You'll see the name across the screen. He went to Harvard. Look him up, folks. Went to Harvard around 14 years old. He was the vice president for James Madison. He actually died in office, incidentally. The term gerrymandering is named after him. I'm going to be honest with you. I don't think I know what gerrymandering is.
Fair.
Do you know what it is,
I do.
Russ? Do you know what it is?
please.
Say no.
No.
Okay, good. Because
So-
I thought, oh my God, I have no idea.
Gerrymandering. So when you draw up congressional districts, right? So a district votes for their representative in any legislative body, right? So you would think that you would take a state or a colony and you would just divide it up evenly, but that's just not how they do it. So what Gerry did was he arranged for a district to be drawn up by demographics so that he knew he would always win in his district.
He was hedging.
Absolutely. And the term mander comes from the district looked like this long, almost snake or salamander look. And so a newspaper said, well, it's Gerry Salamander, it's gerrymandered, and that term has stuck through the centuries.
Is this
Isn't
really
that crazy?
true?
No, this is 100%
I love
true.
it. I love it.
Yeah.
And if you look at congressional districts today,
Oh, yeah, there's gerrymandering all over the country.
Oh, wow. Look at that. One of our signers. Matthew Thornton, he was 62 when he signed. He was also a Mason. Iris Bourne was a doctor, only a doctor because he actually wanted to be a lawyer, but somebody talked him into being a doctor because they needed it. But he later served as a judge later in life. Matthew Thornton, traditional spelling. Robert Treat Payne, he was the 7th signer. He was 45 years old at the time. He was raised in a military lodge. He was also a Harvard grad, an attorney, a former ship captain, and he was a chaplain of a military unit in the French and Indian War. That's Robert Treat Payne.
interesting.
Didn't know. See, I'm not the history guy. You guys that like history more, you're getting me into this. Not really, but William Hooper. So we're gonna get to where we're gonna talk about some of the lesser known. So William Hooper, he was 34 when he signed. He was the 47th signer. Harvard educated attorney. He was also the North Carolina Attorney General. We don't have anything on him yet. We're gonna go. So George Walton. You guys have all heard the name Waltons, like Walmart and Sam's. Not related. He was 35 when he signed. He was a member of Solomon's Lodge No. 1 in Savannah, Georgia. He was the last signer of the Declaration of Independence, a Revolutionary War officer, the governor of Georgia, a chief justice of Georgia. He was a senator, an attorney. He was also a POW for 2 years. Right?
Right.
Yeah.
No, he went through some stuff.
So was he on one of those ships, or do we know where he was held?
I believe it was New York. I
Yeah,
believe he was imprisoned in New York.
Because they were imprisoning men out on ships at times. So
I didn't know that.
I didn't know that. Google that, boys and girls. All right, so we're going to hang up on a couple of them here in a second. Dave's going to spill some knowledge. So William Whipple, 47 when he signed. He was actually raised in St. John's Lodge at 21. He signed third. So I don't think I'm going to give... Do you want me to give the next 3 bullets here, or do you want to am I going to give too much away?
I mean, either way, I mean, we can. I want to dive into him. So
Yeah.
if you want to skip to Richard, and then
All right, we're going to come back to
talk
Whipple. So Richard Stockton, he was 45 at signing, a lot of mid-40s, and what a great time of your life. He was a charter master of St. John's Lodge in Princeton. There were a lot of St. John's Lodges at the time, by the way, in Princeton, New Jersey. He was a 19th signer, an attorney. His family was very wealthy. They donated the land that is now Princeton University. One of the wealthiest men out there, I mean, just a very wealthy family. He was captured in November of 1776 and beaten, and I believe that Brother George Washington helped negotiate his release. Anything on Stockton we want to talk about?
Yeah, a lot.
Okay, fire away.
Is he our last guy?
He is not, but we can jump in.
Okay, all right. So yeah, Richard Stockton is one of my favorite Masonic or forgotten Masonic signers of the Declaration. He was, as you mentioned, very wealthy. His family, lots of land, but he on his own became a very successful lawyer. He was well known on the entire continent, not just North America, but also he was well known in Europe, England especially. He became super wealthy on his own, regardless that his family already had money. He had the largest, or maybe one of the largest, depending on who you're talking to, libraries in North America just at his estate. His own personal library was the largest in the nation. And he was very proud of that. He had a beautiful wife who was a poet, and she was one of the first women to ever be published. So he had everything going for him. He took a year off of practicing law and teaching law at Princeton. He went to England just to visit the kingdoms. And somehow they got word in England that he was coming, so they had a big reception for him when he got there. They wined him and dined him. He had an audience with the king, and this was all in his reputation as an outstanding lawyer in the colonies. And they ended up offering him a position of liaison between England or the crown and the colonies. He ended up declining that, not because he didn't want to, but because he wanted to go into the legislature back home.
Okay.
So I set that up to say, I mean, the man had everything that you could want.
And he put it on the line.
He did put it on the line. He even had a great relationship with the crown, right? This wasn't a guy that hated England. This wasn't a guy that had something out for them. And he went to the Continental Congress on the fence, famously on the fence. He did not know which way he was going to vote. He ended up being convinced by Sam Adams, some of the speeches by Sam Adams, and he ended up towards the end, he actually gave speeches of his own in favor of voting for independence. So this is a guy who had nothing to gain from voting for independence and everything to lose. But he put his name on that parchment anyway. And that is where he went down the downward spiral. Right, so he is certainly the only Masonic signer that was captured by the British because of it. But he was then imprisoned. He hid his family. He left his estate, hid his family. But the British came to his estate. They burned that library that was the biggest in North America. They trashed his estate. A group of loyalists ended up finding him where he and his family were hiding and took a number of people, turned them over to the British. They were then imprisoned in New York in the middle of winter. They were given the option to make a deal for their release. So they had to recant their support for independence. They had to pledge allegiance to the king, and they had to sign an oath that they would not partake in the Revolutionary War going forward. All of them took the deal, and then the British reneged on the deal for him and I think one other. He was thrown into a prison cell in New York in the middle of winter again, with no heat, no extra clothing, open windows, so he froze, he was starved, and he was occasionally beaten. Mm-hmm. He would never recover physically from that. Once he was released, he was always in a bad shape. He was labeled at the time as a traitor because he did recant his support, even though he was forced to. And he wrote in some of his correspondence that just broke his heart, right? Because he gave up everything for independence of our country, and our country labeled him as a traitor. He's been somewhat that's been overturned recently,
Right.
But he ended up dying from lip cancer, which they say he should have survived that, but his physical condition after the
just so beat
torture,
up.
he couldn't survive. So this is a guy, and when I read about the Declaration of Independence and that time in history, I think about the billionaires that we have today, and that was the equivalent that they were back
This
then.
is where I'm hoping you were going, because we talked about this often.
Yeah.
Like, would name billionaire? Let's just go with
Anybody. Rupert Murdoch.
Rupert Murdoch. Would
Donald
Rupert
Trump doesn't-
Murdoch
yeah.
today, would he or his kids give it all up for the country? I just don't know that that's there.
I can't imagine. And not only that, a lot of not Stockton, but a lot of these people, they actually fought in the war.
And these are
Right.
equivalent of billionaires.
For sure. Most of them were, and a lot of them fought in the war. 9 of them, I believe, I'd have to look it up to be sure, but 9 of them died in the war. Right, so billionaires going to war and being killed. You can't imagine that today.
The
from
ultimate
anyone.
leadership.
So, to give that kind of sacrifice that he did, that makes him one of my favorites.
That's
on the
Richard
list.
Stockton.
Yeah.
So let's go to the next one. Let's go back to Whipple. William Whipple, third signer. He was a former slave trader, would later become one of the early abolitionists.
Yeah.
Okay. He was a ship captain before he became a merchant. He was also a general in the Revolutionary War. So Whipple is one that you wanted to flag out as well. Was he one of them?
Yeah, he's another one of my favorites with a bit of a happier ending, right? So William Whipple was the son of a merchant family, a merchant ship family. He was on the seas by the age of 12. He had his own ship as a captain by the age of 21, and he did engage in the slave trade. One of the sources I read said it was at least one trip. I don't buy that. If you're engaged, you're engaged.
Yeah.
I don't believe in minimizing that.
Right.
It's what he did. So one of the interesting things about William Whipple is not just him, but his company. A slave named Prince, not Prince Hall, but a slave named Prince who, in all of his correspondence, William Whipple refers to Prince as his friend. I don't know if that sentiment was reciprocated by Prince being a slave, but Prince basically followed Whipple through the war as sort of a personal bodyguard. The story goes at one point, Whipple was discussing the war with Prince, and Prince said, "I would be fighting for your freedom, but not for mine." Whipple then freed him on the spot. You are a free man now, and from that point on, Prince Whipple voluntarily fought in the war and continued as the bodyguard for William Whipple. Really interesting note, and I'm hoping that you can put this on the screen.
The picture?
Yes.
All right. Everyone pay attention to the screen. You're going to see the photo up. So talk about what they're going
All
to
right.
see.
So everybody has seen the painting of George Washington crossing the Delaware. Probably the most famous image from the Revolutionary War. If you zoom in, which
There's an arrow right here. You're going to see the arrow on the photo.
All right. So there is a dark-skinned man just in front of George Washington to the right. That is Prince Whipple. He is depicted in that painting. William Whipple is in that painting too, but I thought it was really interesting. A freed slave fighting in the Revolution is pictured in the most famous image from the war, and I never knew that. I never saw that before.
Yeah.
I had neither until
Yeah.
you sent that over, and I was amazed.
Yeah.
Just absolutely, blew me away. So after that, William Whipple went on to be an advocate for freeing slaves and letting them fight in the Revolutionary War. It was his dream that as the war moved south, more and more slaves would be freed, and to fight in the war, and then eventually all of them would be freed. So he became one of the earliest abolitionists. I mean, we all know how that turned out, but about 80 years later, that's what came to fruition. But I just thought that was really cool. He finished the war. He became a brigadier general. He was just under George Washington, very well received. You didn't put it on the notes there, but quite a few battles. He was given awards for his valor, for everything that he did. The reason he's kind of a forgotten founding father is because so many of the founding fathers were slave owners and they didn't appreciate his abolitionist views. So,
there's a lot of conversation about the initial draft of the Declaration of Independence, some things that Thomas Jefferson was asked to pull out for kind of that same type of deal because there were some contradictions because he was a slave owner. We'll have some links down in the comments for some interesting podcasts about that. So the next known Mason we're going to talk about, Joseph Hughes, 48th signer. He was actually born as a Quaker in New Jersey, but then went away from that. He was a state legislator. He was buried with Masonic honors and is actually buried in Christ Church. There's not many Masons that are so he was very important to Brother George Washington.
His funeral was... did you say that? I'm so sorry. His funeral was attended by George Washington.
I didn't say that, but it makes sense. Right, yeah. William Ellery, 48 at signing. He was the 10th signer, another lawyer, another Harvard grad, a member of St. John's in Boston. So there are some other ones that are possible Masons, so we're just going to kind of bridge through them. Richard Sherman, he claimed to have been made a Mason prior to the American Revolution. Masonic apron said to be worn by him is in his collection at Yale. We don't know for sure. Josiah Bartlett, he was named, listed at the charter member of King Solomon's Lodge, so he was listed as a charter member. His descendants, however, say he was not a member of the craft, so we don't know this for sure. It could be that they just didn't want him to be associated with that. Who knows?
So, West Wing, the TV show, back in the day, wasn't that the name that they used for the president?
Josiah Bartlett?
From Massachusetts.
I never watched
don't know
it.
that.
Yeah.
Okay, look across the screen and we'll let you know if Russ is right or not. Philip Livingston, often referred to as a Mason, but is open to debate. He's got records in the Grand Lodge of New York. None of the archives disclose his name. Several members named Livingston that are noted, but not necessarily him. Thomas McKean, he was actually 42 at the time of the signing. His genealogy stated he was a Mason, although his names aren't found in the records of the Grand Lodge of Delaware. So, but possibly. John Penn, known to have attended several lodges in North Carolina, but his affiliation's not verified. I don't know how you can attend a lodge and not be a Mason, but I don't know how they handled it back then.
Well, I'll interject. My wife has attended lodge when you had open lodge, right?
Oh.
So, I mean, it can happen. But some of these...
You can attend lodge, meaning the building, not so...
But you would be on the records.
Right.
Oh, the open lodge.
Right. So now some of them that aren't... So your most conservative historians will say, there's 8 or 9. I think we're at 11, right?
Yeah.
Where there's very strong evidence for up to 21, but it's very hard to prove. But some of the evidence is they are registered as visitors in a tiled lodge.
Right.
And we know what that means.
Yeah.
So that's pretty incontrovertible, but some of them we just don't know their home lodge. We don't know, when they were raised. Part of the problem is a lot of the grand lodges for the colonies or states thereafter were not... I'm trying to think of the word. They were there, but they weren't regulated until after the Revolution.
And could records and archives got lost or stolen or stuff happens, right?
And moved in it.
It's not like there was a hard drive to pass around in a server in a cloud, right? Lyman Hall claimed to have been a member of Solomon's Lodge number 1 in Savannah. We don't know. Thomas Nelson claimed to have visited Lodge number 9 in Yorktown, Virginia, after the siege. It was after the siege that was lifted in the Revolutionary War. So, Livingston, did we talk about Livingston? No, we did? Okay. I want to make sure. So, tell us what you thought. This was we learned some interesting things about the Declaration of Independence. One, when it was signed and when it wasn't signed. I'm going to stick with the story that I think John Hancock gave a big middle finger to the king and signed his name big.
I like it.
I like it. I like the story.
It's a little bit of boom. Here I am.
It is that is the modern day thing. So that's all we have. So Dave, as always, thanks for the topics.
Thanks,
the good
guys.
old fashioned Masonic
Appreciate it.
podcast. Thank you.